Niger is moving toward expansion and prosperity. The country has advanced significantly over time in several areas, building the groundwork for a more prosperous future. Several variables, such as social efforts, infrastructure development, and economic changes, are responsible for this good trajectory. Niger has enacted significant economic reforms to cultivate a favorable business climate and draw in foreign investment. These reforms have strengthened transparency, advanced private sector involvement, and improved governance. As a result, the nation has seen a rise in foreign direct investment and more attention from international partners. However, Niger has halted pipeline exports to a certain country via its pipeline to Benin's coast. So, in today's video, we will be shedding more light on this story. We will also talk about how Benin gave the green light for exports to this said country. But before we continue, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the new tourist channel to get first-hand information on whatever is going on in Niger. According to Oil Minister Mahamane Moustafa Bako, Niger has cut off oil deliveries to China through its pipeline to Benin's shore, intensifying the standoff between the neighbors in West Africa. At the Agadim oil field in eastern Niger, the minister oversaw the padlocking of a section of the 2,000-kilometer pipeline through which exports to China were meant to flow under a memorandum of understanding with state-owned oil giant China National Petroleum Corp. (CNPC), worth $400 million. Since Benin barred crude exports from landlocked Niger through its port in May and demanded that the military leaders restore its border to Benin's commodities and normalize relations, cross-border relations have been strained. 5 Niger citizens were held by Benin police earlier in June on suspicion of entering the country's Semi-Kapaji pipeline terminal under false pretenses. Niger has denied these accusations, stating that the group was there to oversee the loading of crude following a deal with Benin. "We can't just sit back while our oil is stolen by other people, because we're not there where it's loaded," the minister told workers, explaining the decision to halt flows, according to a broadcast on state television. Tensions stem from a coup in Niger in July 2023, which prompted the ECOWAS regional organization to impose harsh sanctions for over 6 months. Leaders of the economic community of West African states met to address a political crisis in the coup-hit region that deepened in January with military-ruled Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali's decision to exit the 15-member bloc. After closed-door talks, ECOWAS said it had decided to lift Niger sanctions, including border closures, the freezing of central bank and state assets, and the suspension of commercial transactions with immediate effect. In a communique, it said this was done for humanitarian reasons, but the move will be seen as a gesture of appeasement as ECOWAS tries to persuade the 3 junta states to remain in the nearly 50-year-old alliance. Their planned exit would bring a messy disentanglement from the bloc's trade and services flows, worth nearly $150 billion a year. Bear in mind that Niger has maintained its borders closed to products from Benin, despite expectations that trade flows in the region would normalize following the bloc's lifting of sanctions. In June, Niger's military leaders confirmed that rebels damaged an oil pipeline carrying crude oil to neighboring Benin. The Patriotic Liberation Front, which is fighting for the release of former President Mohamed Bazoum, said it was behind the attack. It has demanded that the Chinese businesses operating the pipeline stop supporting the military government and threatened to attack oil sites. With ties between Niger and Benin continuing to deteriorate, this was the most recent setback to affect the recently opened 2,000-kilometer pipeline. State media said the malicious individuals who had sabotaged part of the pipeline would be apprehended and prosecuted. Videos from the state-run channel Tele Sahel revealed the destruction in the southern Zinder region of Niger, including an oil leak that extended into the surrounding forest. The pipeline, which connects Benin's coast to Niger's Agadim oil field, was formally inaugurated at the end of last year and is expected to be crucial to the economy of both countries. However, since the coup of last year, when Niger was subject to regional sanctions, its future has been in doubt. All this comes after Benin gave a green light for Niger's oil exports to China. For months, Benin has been blocking a pipeline set to export crude oil from Niger to China. Now the trade dispute appears to have been resolved with China's mediation. Benin's concession was a critical step in settling a trade dispute between the neighbors of West Africa that threatened to seriously harm both nations' economies. The Chinese government and the Chinese-owned firms running the recently opened pipeline between Agadim in eastern Niger and Semikapaji in southern Benin mediated the rapprochement. In recent months, the closure of the Niger-Benin border has primarily affected Benin's state revenues and increased food costs, which led to protests over the high cost of living. In Benin, the protests against the coup leaders were particularly explicit. Beninese President Patrice Talon loudly demanded Bazoum's reinstatement and even advocated for a military intervention by ECOWAS troops against the coup leaders in Niger. Significant financial losses have resulted from the near halt of trade between Niger and Benin, particularly for the Beninese. Prior to the coup, Benin's port of Cotonou handled practically all of Niger's imports, including food, automobiles, and consumer items. Alternative routes were deemed difficult and dangerous because of an Islamist insurgency in Burkina Faso, such as via the port of Lome in Togo, and then via Burkina Faso. Niger increased its collaboration with a nation that has been ruled by a military regime, even if doing so came with risks. Niger progressively transferred its imports through Burkina Faso. The fact that Burkina Faso and Niger were politically and economically approaching each other while trade relations between Niger and Benin were collapsing raised eyebrows in Benin. Benin's position not to allow ships carrying Nigerian crude oil to enter the ports in Benin threatened the survival of Niger's military leaders. More than 90,000 barrels of crude per day were earmarked for shipping to China through the pipeline that travels through Benin. Benin has been blocking Niger's plans and preventing Chinese ships from loading crude oil from Niger. Some analysts say that Benin's choice to temporarily halt the flow of crude oil from Niger to China via Beninese ports was at least understandable. Benin could justify the decision by invoking the principle of state sovereignty and the principle of reciprocity, meaning that the Nigerian side had also closed the borders with its neighbor, and thus must expect a similar countermeasure. Benin took this action in an attempt to pressure Niger to reopen its borders so that people living on both sides may resume normal trading relations. Others said that Benin's decision to block Niger's crude oil exports might potentially contravene international law. Under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, an international agreement providing a legal framework for all marine and maritime activities, landlocked states like Niger are legally guaranteed access to the sea. One thing is clear, Niger urgently needs revenue from oil exports to China. Since the 2023 coup, Niger has been facing major financial difficulties. Western countries have suspended development aid, except for humanitarian assistance. Therefore, oil exports are crucial for the Nigerian military regime. China has now apparently been able to successfully mediate in the conflict. China maintains good relations with both countries and has a vital interest in protecting investments in the region. Niger, Benin, and China are the three participating nations, and they all place a high value on the crude oil industry. All three nations' delegates hailed the pipeline's completion in April as a forward-looking project. The pipeline stands for a future of prosperity and more independence from traditional partners, such as France and Western Europe. Niger and Benin need each other. The port of Cotonou wants to continue to handle imported goods for Niger, and Niger urgently needs to pump its crude oil through Benin territory toward Cotonou to prevent a national bankruptcy. However, there could be several reasons for Niger's decision to refuse to sell oil to China, such as the need for economic diversification, national security concerns, or the goal of building a more diverse and balanced trade portfolio. Niger can be looking into other markets or attempting to bargain for better conditions from possible purchasers. The decision emphasizes the intricate dynamics of global trade and the changing nature of international relations. It emphasizes how crucial it is for nations to declare their independence and make choices consistent with their long-term strategic goals. It will be critical for Abderrahmane Chiani to carefully weigh his options going forward and take into account any potential effects these choices may have on the nation's diplomatic ties, economy, and energy industry. Niger will need to negotiate these difficulties to secure its economic growth and development because the country's decision to refuse to sell oil to China may bring both opportunities and obstacles. What other obstacles do you think this decision will bring to Niger? Let us know in the comments below. Do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the New Tourist channel. Turn on notifications too so you get notified whenever we upload videos like this. Thanks for watching and see you in our next video.